Yes, I did. That was good. We're on. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a NorthStar Community Online Service. So excited to be here. And as you can see today, I got two of my favorite people in my life sitting here. I got Mark on this side and Lisa on this side, and they've agreed to jump in and talk about, I know for you, Mark, for sure, this is one of your favorite subjects. And so we're going to talk about silence and prayer. But what's important here is we're always kind of going on themes here, and so let's back up way back. So we started out we've been talking about passionate purpose and how it's so important for us in recovery that we have a purpose, that we don't just survive. And it's just such a hard way to live when we're living around survival. So then what we do is we start looking at some of the reasons why we have a hard time establishing purpose, and we've talked a lot about that. One of my favorite stories is when one of us in NorthStar defiantly told me, not only do I not have a purpose, I don't want a purpose. That's probably not a good way to go. But for many of us, again, I make the assumption if you're here today, you're in recovery. So the other assumptions I make with that is that, depending on where you are in that, you may be pre-step one, where you're saying, I'm good, I'm not in trouble, but I'm going to just see what they're talking about, right? All the way to maybe many years of recovery, and so we're all somewhere in there from not recovering to in recovery, but still knowing we need to hear about all this. And so we like to look at kind of specific reasons why purpose is hard for us, why connecting is hard for us, why not surviving is difficult, because that's all we've known. So again, our definition of addiction is habitual behavior to avoid pain. So addiction starts with pain, and addiction ends with pain, and the hard part is doing all that. So then what we do is we kind of figure out, well, gosh, I've spent a whole lot of my life avoiding being destructive, being addictive. And so we're trying to just become aware of what we're doing and then give you some ideas about ways to move forward. And so one of the subjects we've been talking about a little bit, and it's a little bit tricky. It's one of those subjects that I tell people I understand, but I don't always do a great job of getting it across. But there's this thing called fear of being controlled and fear of being controlling. If you understand this, what it really means is we spend a whole lot of time and energy and destructive behaviors just fighting being controlled by people or us fear of being controlled. And they both are very frightening to us. And again, it kind of gets back to, why don't we just live our lives and get a purpose and quit worrying so much about all this stuff? So this is Dr. Margaret Paul, who I really like. She talks about this. She goes, so it's the authoritarian you who wants total control while wanting to be permissive, indulgent you who resists being controlled. How does that sound for confusing? So I always like to say kind of the symbolic statement to this is, I need to stop doing this. It's destroying my life. I'm creating problems for my family. My health's gone, blah, blah, blah. I need to quit doing this. Wait a minute. I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want. That is the fear of being controlled and fear of being controlling. So I don't know about you, but it sounds a little bit dysfunctional and a lot of energy. So why in the world would we be talking today about silence and prayer? What's that got to do with this? Well, it has everything to do with it, because when I'm busy praying to God about all the things that he needs to do or all the bad things about me, I am now resisting being controlled and resisting being controlling. So why don't we do this crazy thing and turn our life and will over to God? And so like I like to say is maybe close our mouths and listen. Crazy, huh? Yeah. So Eugene Peterson has this great definition of silence and prayers. He calls it disciplined and intentional passivity, meaning that let's listen. So do you guys got any thoughts on this about the silence and prayer as we continue here?
Well, I know when I first started into this, and prayer was very hard, and my mind was just constantly racing. So I had to learn and practice prayers that I could eventually recite, and that gave me some discipline. The other part is stopping to listen to whatever is just in the area wherever I'm at. But I particularly love to do this outside on my back porch. And I know yesterday morning I was up early just before sunrise, and I just started paying attention. I say first, I usually say my prayers, or some that I really get some benefit out of, that just kind of puts me in a good zone. And then I just started listening, and there was all these birds. I mean, they were really loud, and I hadn't even been paying attention to them when I first came out. And then I started noticing some crows started chirping in, and then before the sun came up, the mourning doves, and that's got some memories for me. My mom had a story about a mourning dove, and she used to make this sound, cupping her hands together and making that sound, and that I just started thinking about her. And then all of a sudden the sun came up and everything was really quiet, and I wouldn't have paid attention to that if I hadn't have been intentionally trying to do that. And it really got my day going off on the right foot.
Good. Yep. Is there anything?
Well, I was just going to say, it is a perfect subject for recovery because, you know, I notice that everyone who comes through our doors and been there, every one of us has been there at one time, you are so consumed with controlling what is going to happen, what you are going to do, what others are doing. People are at a point of like insanity because they need relief. They're like, something has to stop, something has to change, I'm about to lose my mind, you know, and I think they are terrified, just like you said, Mark, at the beginning. It's scary. They're terrified of silence. You know, they think that that's, I don't know, is there a bomb going to go off if they sit there quiet for a minute, or if things kind of, but, you know, just spinning in this insanity of, I have to make this stop. I have to find out what's going on. I have to run around and do this. I need to make sure these people are doing this or not. I have to get myself together. I have to do this perfectly, or, you know, all these things. And so there's so much noise and there's so much spinning that, and they don't know, we don't know at the start of this process that what we really need is silence and prayer and surrender. But we are terrified of.
There you go. Yeah, silence is very frightening because we get to hear the inner committee in our head a little more. So, you know, I was thinking back when I was talking about fear of being controlling and fear of being controlled. Here's some kind of bullet points for us. Think about these. One is rigid rules. So how many of you out there and us sitting here have these rigid rules we heard about prayer? So it was so funny the other night, if you'd been in our meeting, our NorthStar meeting, I brought this up about how we need to look differently at how we do prayer. And immediately 3 or 4 people said, well, I've been praying wrong. That's us again, that perfectionism, the rigid rules. And so I want to make sure, like what Mark, you're talking about, you pray like I guess we would know, but then you go to silence. So I want to make sure all of you out there, I'm not telling you to stop praying. We're just telling you to consider a different way of doing it. And so think about, so why do we not like science? We have rigid rules. We have internal judgments about ourselves, which you, of course, you know, are very difficult. Our inner criticism. Hear them. And so now, again, we're saying to you, you have to acknowledge the pain in your life. Silence is not pleasant at times, and so we've spent our lives, think of all of us out here in our addictive behaviors, spinning our tires, getting nowhere, doing nothing, but we're so busy doing nothing and being destructive, it keeps us from having to hear all this stuff.
The busiest people on the planet. We are.
Oh, is it the busiest but get nothing done are us when we're addictive? So let me read Philippians. Kim Engelman in her book says Philippians is the most joyful book in the Bible. So Paul's not as mad at the Philippians as he is the others, is what it gets down to. If you ever, all you got to do is read the first 2 verses of Paul when he's talking to the Corinthians. You can tell how irritated and annoyed he is with them, right? Or not by the first couple. So just when you read that, see that. So he's writing to the Philippians, and he goes, celebrate God all day, every day. I mean, revel in him. Make it as clear as you can to all you meet that you're on their side, working with them and not against them. Don't fret or worry. Instead of worrying, pray. What a thought. Let petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers, letting God know your concerns. Before you know it, a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for good, will come and settle you down. It's wonderful what happens when Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. And, Mark, I was reading this, I was thinking about you again. You do let people know your petitions, but then you quit and you just listen. And I think that's what Paul's talking about here.
That's the communication with God to me. It's not just one way asking all the time for something or just repeating something over and over again. And that's important to get into the habit, but taking time to listen, and that's where miracles can happen.
Right.
Literally.
Whew, tough, though. So speaking of miracles, so Kim Engelman in her book, again, she goes, this is a quote of hers, suffering, it may not be alleviated. There may be no way to escape the pain of our circumstances, but through intentional prayer, miracles happen in the midst of our pain that reminds us of God's presence and power. It's pretty good. And if you knew her story, now she was abused emotionally and verbally abused by her mother, who was very religious, very rigid, and very toxic. She used that against her all the time. Her dad was a renowned theological religious professor, and he chose to not support his children. He chose to try to live within the dysfunction of the 2 of them and caused lots of problems. So she had a lot of trauma and abandonment in her life. And she came and then got through it, and now she's a pastor, and really, good stuff. So we know that God is able to do abundantly far more than we can ask or imagine. We know that. But we get kind of in our 4th grade Christianity, and we think that means, God, I want a new car, and I want all my pain to go away, and it just doesn't happen that way. It may, but it doesn't usually happen that way. And so we have to be patient, and we have to see prayer as real. And that's what I think is important here. And when we, again, for you that aren't with us, but in NorthStar, there's so much healing going on right now, I think, as a group. It's amazing. I think it's because of our getting more and more, comfortable with listening instead of doing so much.
And I think that's a key for a lot of people that come in. In the beginning, a lot of people have got a story to share. They're in turmoil. Their story is, you feel it. And then they start listening, and they get feedback, and they realize they're not alone, and other people have been through something similar. And Friday night, good example, someone who for years a smile was as rare as could be, and they're sitting there engaged, smiling naturally. It was just, those are the things that are so, it's miraculous. I mean, it literally is a complete change in there. And it was something gradual that happened, but I think from them listening and sharing, that was a huge moment for me.
Well, we, as you know, for many of us, we don't know what connection means. And so not only are we disconnected from ourselves, we're disconnected from God. And so people coming to the NorthStar groups now are actually starting to connect with people who are trustworthy. What another crazy moment, right? And so when we're NorthStar, we're not selling anything. We're not forcing people to do anything. But to hear, people such as us who've been in recovery for a while, we understand a little better the connections. We understand that we can connect to God, and we're just saying in different ways now. Yeah. And, what I think that one of the things that I think is a great point that Kim Engelman was talking about, she's talking about how there is an enemy out there. I believe that. I believe there's a dark enemy out there. And addiction, one writer, George Hunter, wrote in his book, he said, addiction is the tool of Satan for our generation. Because we can synthesize better, we can synthesize substances so much better than we ever used to be able to. We can get online and do compulsive, addictive behaviors with no problem, and we can connect with people in superficial, destructive ways, in ways that we couldn't have done in our past. At least when I was a child, we couldn't have. And so the addiction is the tool of Satan because it's so alluring. And as Kim M says, Jesus needed prayer. You never saw him shirking it. He was always talking about it. And I remember you were talking a little bit about.
Yeah, it's the perfect transition. Lisa Turkhurst had a talk that it was just a fabulous concept that I had really never heard put before. And, prayer being real, it's got to be real to us. And it's not a formality, just like you said, Mark. And I think so many people that come into NorthStar, or so many people that are struggling in general, they don't know what an actual relationship with God and with people looks like.
Yeah, they've never had it.
Yeah, and this realness that is there. They have a cartoon. We talk a lot about cartoon Jesus vision of a relationship with God and what love and what God's love looks like and what a relationship looks like. And it doesn't necessarily look like what we think it looks like. A lot of people think that they're supposed to be, righteous and uplifted and positive and always praising, always, it looks like something different because they're sad and they're scared and they're worried and all these things. Well, Lisa Turkhurst said, we scramble trying to find answers. That's one of the things with the spinning that we're constantly doing. We're looking for these answers because we think that these answers will make us be able to calm down and sit silently or something. Well, Jesus, number one, he was perfect. He was divinity. But his prayers weren't always lovely looking or sounding.
No.
And he had all the answers. Jesus had every single answer that there is to be found. He was the answer himself, right? And in Mark 14:13, he had all the answers, and his soul still churned, and his soul was still crying out and desperate. And it says that he took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death, he said to them. Jesus. He was overwhelmed and in sorrow to the point of death. There are so many people walking around out here that think if that's how they feel, they have somehow failed. That they are failing in a walk with God. They're failing in who they're supposed to be. Jesus, that was Jesus. And he said, stay here and watch. And then going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. Abba, Father, he said, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. So he had all the answers. He knew how it ended. He knew why he was doing this. He knew that he was going to save all of us. He knew that he was doing this because love was going to rain down and save everyone. And yet, he still was like, no. No, I don't like this, and I don't want to do this.
Right.
How many times have we heard that in NorthStar? I'm looking at some people out here. I don't like this, and I don't want to do this. You can make anything happen. I don't want it to go like this. This is what Jesus said. I can't handle this. I have sorrow. My soul is feeling sorrow and depression to the point of death. I can't do it. That was Jesus. So, that's real. That is what having a real relationship with God looks like. He was connecting to God. He was crying out, and he was connecting to God. So,
Well, and let me jump in. What a classic example of someone who was not trying to be controlling or controlled.
absolutely not. He was not worried about how he was coming across.
Right.
He was not worried about how he was praying. He was not worried about how God was going to perceive him. He wasn't worried about what was going on in his own heart. He was just present with God and being and feeling what was actually there. Completely uninhibited.
I think that's how he had such a powerful connection. People could feel he was being real. And they didn't even know exactly who he was, but that was how he connected with them and connected on a really deep spiritual level. And, I mean, and his example is what we're trying to follow, and it works. It works.
Yeah, think about those 4 disciples, what that must have been like that night watching that.
Yes.
Yeah. So make sure we understand, because I know, again, we have this thing about being perfect, about being controlling, but not being controlled, right? And not being controlling, right? So prayer is not about perfection. You got to hear that, right? But we can believe that God can do anything. What he really asks for is our cooperation, our participation. He wants our input, he wants our love, he wants our investment. That's really what we're after. And I like this quote about Jesus is not pushy, he has a divine courtesy. So it's up to us to do some of this. And I like the analogy of, it's like when you have a guest coming to your home, you work, you notice things you wouldn't notice normally. You get the pillows right, and you get your kitchen counter at least somewhat cleaned up, and blah, blah, blah. You do all these things. Because you have that energy, well, that's the energy we should try to emulate in prayer, is try to come up with a way to have that when we're going into prayer, to have some anticipation. So now, for us that are worried about being controlling and not controlled, it's okay if you don't feel that way. All right? I'm going to keep saying this to you. I know how we are. We go, well, I must be, oh my gosh, I'm not praying right now. That is not what we're saying here. So make sure I keep saying that to everybody, right? But we do need our space. We need to do things. And, when we spend time, when we start spending time telling God what he needs to do, or those things, those don't work very well. It's good you're doing it. I want to make sure you hear that, again, for you perfectionists out there. But the idea is maybe we can just increase our silence a little bit. And I was just looking here. So if we change our life, our prayer life, and we go to more listening and talking less, then we don't have to be in charge of God so much, right? And we need to surrender as opposed to controlling. It's hard to do. I was telling them in the meeting the other day, so we've been talking about this, so I said, well, if I'm going to talk about it, I guess I probably should do it, right? Like, actually do what I'm talking about. And so I have very ADHD. It's very hard for me to sit and not be doing something. When I'm talking to people, I'm much happier if I'm doing something while I'm talking to them. I can hear them good, but I'm very ADHD. So I said, I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes, and I'm going to do silence for 10 minutes. And as I was telling them the other day, I said, I thought, first 2 minutes, I thought I was going to jump out of my skin. It was painful. I mean, I still feel a little almost anxious about it. And it was hard because I was thinking about all the things I wasn't doing, I should be doing, and they were all good things. I need to be doing something for NorthStar. I need to be getting hold of some people, blah, blah, blah. It was all good stuff, trust me, right? And, of course, not 10 minutes. You can't give up 10 minutes, right, because it needs to be done, right? So anyway, by minute 8, I think, 'cause I wasn't really looking, minute 8, things got a little better, but it was hard. It was hard. And when the timer went off, I went, oh, whew, made it. I was silent, maybe. But maybe I wasn't, actually. But the point was, I at least tried. And I will tell you, it was a positive experience now, as I sit here now, looking back to it. How long did it take you, Mark, to get from wanting to go do everything and not do silence to where, I mean, it sounds like you actually have become somewhat successful at this.
Well, I'll still say it's it's hard. I mean, and to me, I was involved with a morning meeting that started with St. Francis prayer, which is one of my favorites, and it afterwards there was 7 minutes of silence, and it was hard, and it was amazing to watch people who are not used to something like that, but it literally has taken years. I mean, and but I don't know how long or when it exactly happened when I first was able to sit through the whole 7 minutes, and or they had a bell that would ring, and when I would go, oh my God, that went by and I wasn't. But I call it my monkey mind. It's just constant chatter, and it is things that are important that I've got to do. I've always been thinking ahead or thinking what's happened to me in the past that I didn't communicate right, or somebody misunderstood me, and I'm still replaying that. And it's practice. It's just like anything. But it's a mental practice instead of a physical practice. And physically it is. You just got to sit still, and that really helps. Although people do it, walking meditations or walking silence, and there's different ways. There's no right or wrong. Everybody's got their own preferences, whether they listen to birds chirping or they listen to heavy metal music, and that gives them silence, or it numbs out that monkey mind. There's no right or wrong, but the thing is, if you're focusing and trying to focus on what God is trying to tell you, you will get success. And I've seen it over and over, but I've never had so much resistance to people not wanting to try it and or excuses why they can't. And it's sad to me in a way, because some people just will not give it a try. But I promise I've seen it. All I can offer is my experience, and it's really helped me, and I needed it.
Good. So listening to God is way better than us telling God what the solution is. How about that? Of course, we know none of us ever do that, right? And how can we get out of this futile, addictive thinking? How can we get past? And it's always the same answer. It's a process. It takes time. It takes faith. It takes connection. And those are hard. So we're running out of time. So I guess the next, I'll say this, and I want you guys to help me for a minute. Tell us what you've done that does work. But you're going to have some false starts. You're going to drift off. Your inner committee is going to kick in and tell you all things you should be doing, or what you should have done, or the shame that you have from the past, or all those things is going to happen. You're going to fidget. You're going to forget what you're doing, and you're going to be thinking about something you are solving. You'll have to ward off the toxic shame thoughts. There's a lot of stuff's going to go on, and that's a little bit probably why you're saying people resist it, right? But if you could, what's worked for you in your silence?
Anybody that knows me knows that silence and I don't go well together. No. I think that it's hard because we have spent so much time trying not to sit alone with ourselves, and the habits that we formed are the total opposite of the habits that we need to have. So for me, just like you said, it's practice. It's just showing up over and over and over again. And God changes us. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Prayer for me is sort of like you. I have that racing sort of ADD mind, all kinds of things all the time. And I'll find myself drifting off. But I know that God knows how each of our brains work. God knows how each of our hearts work. He wants us to show up. He wants us to sit there with both hands open. So for me, it's practice. I always kind of go, God, you're good. I know you're good. You're good to me. And you're good at being God. You know, and so whatever is showing up in this prayer here, take it and do with it what you would have me do. You know, I just ask God to, most of the time, just to change me. And little by little by little by little, he has changed me. and giving me what I need.
So are you saying that for your silent prayer, you use like some sort of a mantra of some sort to
Yeah, I do.
keep you?
I do, and when I drift off or when I whatever, I just get real with it, like I do with everything else. Like, Lord, I'm drifting off. You know, I do. I in my mind, I just have dialogue and say, look, I don't know if what I'm thinking or saying here is right, and I'm feeling like I'm drifting off, and I feel stupid even that I'm doing, and I can't. You know, I'm very real in my prayer. Lord, just help me. You know, take everything away. And my dialogue with the Lord in that, over time, it just gets easier. It just gets easier. And you get into a deeper connection. It's a process. Everything is a process. Nobody wants it to be a process. They want it to be like it's supposed to be right now, and that does not happen.
All right, good. So, Mark, any suggestions you have people?
Well, I'll even just say if I want to change, and I can't make myself get there, I will just pray for the willingness to start with, and over and over again, and sometimes it takes way longer than I want it to take, but if I stick to it, I get some relief. And then I will communicate with other people too and ask for other suggestions. I'm open to all kinds of things where I see people that have something that I want. I will communicate with them a lot better than I used to. I used to think I was in control, and that's how it worked. And now letting God and accepting that God is going to be in control, I get a lot more relief. But it's a daily thing. It's a constant daily thing that I have to continue to work on. Yeah. But it's much more comfortable than it used to be.
So I guess what I'm hearing from you guys is be purposeful and intentional. And then for all of us out here, again, the fear of controlling and fear of being controlled, just try it. You'll drift. You'll do all those things. It's okay. It's okay. The fact is you're trying to commune with God. You're trying to connect with God. That's what he cares about. So we can get away from all the perfectionism and the way you were told you had to do it, and just sit down and just, God knows your heart. Like you said, he knows your heart. And that's what matters. So God is love. He wants us to commune.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, you can't be in the presence of God and give yourself to God in that time and not be changed. So no matter what it looks like or what it sounds like or what you feel about it, when you come to God, you'll be changed, even if it's a hair.
Yep.
He knows how to take care of us. He knows how to do his job, right?
Yeah, we think so. Sometimes we wonder, but yes. So, yeah. So God is love. God is perfect. God wants what's best for us. God wastes nothing. God is good. So, well, I thank you guys for joining me today. Way better than have to listen to me talk. And so we meet, excuse me, I got frog in my throat. So we meet on Wednesdays and Fridays at 6:30 here at Walnut Grove Baptist Church, 7046 Cold Harbor Road, Mechanicsville. We feed you. We have child care. I mean, we take away a lot of reasons for you not to come. And you get to connect with other people who probably are sharing a lot of the same stories you are. And it's so helpful when you realize you're not alone. It really does help you recover. So anyway, I'd love to have you. If you ever want to reach out to me, email me at csimpson@wgva.church. And always love to hear from you. So we always close with the prayer of serenity, so we will do that today. And thank you for being here. And Stephen, thanks for your help. Let's pray. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever and the next. Amen. Again, have a great week and hope to see you soon.